Oh, yeah. I guess I shouldn't call him babe in a professional setting.
But I think it's so cool that your SO can do your sound tech. Like,
Me
that
too.
is life goals. Like, if I was to have a CV of what my partner needs, it'd be like, if you can't fuck with my audio, you can't fuck with me. Period.
It's so true. I'm just always like, he just watches all these tech videos. And when I said I wanted to start a podcast, he was like, yeah, we could do that. Like, I can figure it out.
It's like, my love language is if you can't eliminate the noise in the background of my vocal track, we're over.
It's just going to get longer and longer and longer, isn't it?
Welcome to another episode of Black Frasier. I'm your host extraordinaire, Phoebe Lynn Robinson. And as always, I'm joined by my co-producer, my editor, the love of my life.
I'm waiting. As you... No. Okay, thank God.
I thought on episode 5, I'd give you a break.
It's only taken 5 episodes, but thank you.
And not make it instantly sexual.
I think the listeners will be thanking you for that one.
We'll see. Anyway, this might cost us a Webby nomination.
Because of the crudeness taken out?
Yes.
Okay. I'll take that risk.
You guys know him. You love him. I'm talking about British Bloody Bake Off. Alliterations are hard sometimes.
They are hard, you're right. But hello.
How you doing, mate?
I'm doing great.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm doing great.
Okay, you look very nice.
Thank you.
I feel like you own a yacht.
Oh, yeah. Like, get some nice boat shoes on.
I mean, we're dressed like we're going on vacation, but we've been quarantining for like our whole lives at this point.
It does feel like that, doesn't it? Also, your eyeshadow looks amazing as well.
You know what? It's NARS.
I don't know what that is.
That's a makeup brand.
Oh, okay.
And the lip is Pat McGrath. I want a
Ooh.
neutral, like pinky. Ooh.
I mean, that's what you're giving me. Ooh.
Am I giving you a chub?
Stop it.
So the answer is yes?
No.
Oh. Let me see under that desk. He has his hands placed in a convenient location, so I can't see anything, y'all. Anyway, the reason why I brought up our cute little sort of like summer looks is because I want to talk about fashion a little bit, because this episode is all about identity and degender fashion with, oh my God, one of my new like obsessions, Alok. They is so smart, charming, fantastic, amazing style. And is one of those people who's so iconic that they only need like a first name.
Absolutely.
Like you need my name. You need the last name.
Yeah, I need the middle name and last name.
Well, it's because Phoebe Waller-Bridge, this hoe, came up in the scene. So now I'm Black
You
Phoebe.
cussing out Phoebe Waller-Bridge?
I love her, but now I'm going to be freaking Black Phoebe until I, take over Hollywood, if that ever happens.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to take back my name right now. How's it going?
Going well.
But no, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, if you would do this podcast, it would be so fun. But, talking about fashion, sort of like, and Alok's whole thing is degendering fashion, which is something that's a new concept for me. I feel like I learned about maybe at the beginning of this year, maybe end of last year. And these arbitrary sort of like designations, like a pink blouse is only for women, or like, baggy jeans are only for men, are kind of like arbitrary, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, but I'm wondering, like, what did you think about your fashion growing up, and how do you think it informed your identity and helped you move throughout the world?
Well, my fashion growing up was terrible.
Really? What was it?
I was a little skater boy, so it was the baggy jeans, the massive shoes.
Oh my gosh.
My mum used to go mad at me because I'd never pull my trousers up. They were always so baggy that my ass was hanging out. My boxers were on show.
What?
Yeah.
Were you wearing were you wearing Janko jeans?
I don't know them.
Oh, are those are only in the States?
I don't know.
They're just like super, super duper wide leg.
I mean, I could fit my whole shoe inside my jeans at one point of wearing them. And then obviously the fashion completely changed and I was an emo kid wearing skin tight jeans.
I've never seen you in a skin tight pants.
No one needs that. They really don't.
But do you think like you were dressing to sort of like hold up to your idea of what masculinity was?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that even into my late 20s, I still was, or still am, maybe. Wear suits, like 3-piece suits.
You're a dandy though now, I feel like.
Yeah, I do think so.
Yeah.
Ever since meeting you, I think, is when I started to definitely de-gender fashion, for sure, and have more of that kind of view.
Oh. Wow. So I'm a positive influence?
Shocking, I know.
I mean, I think my fashion was like, I don't know. It's hard to say because I felt like I wasn't a cool kid. I definitely didn't feel pretty. And I went to like a prep school, like a private prep school for high school. So, it was like a lot of button downs and pleated khakis.
Yeah, I've never understood that look.
And like turtleneck dickies. Did you know about turtleneck
I do
dickies?
know about turtleneck dickies.
Yeah, I know.
Were you wearing them?
Yes.
Wow.
Octavia Valina Robinson was like, bitch, we are going to New York and Company to get you some dickies. Yes.
Wow, that's a whole insight there.
So obviously I was I kept my virginity for a long time.
A dickie would do that.
Yeah, no dudes are like, oh yeah, that turtleneck dickie.
Just keep it on. Keep the dickie on.
Yeah, I know it was like not my finest kind of hours, but I feel like I think now I play much more with fashion and I'm down for like wearing extra baggy stuff or skin tight stuff. Maybe want to show off my figure.
I think that all comes from being more comfortable in your body now, though. And that's definitely since knowing you, your fashion has definitely evolved and you're much more willing to take risks now and not conform to those like gender roles where, I mean, you wear some fantastic suits for sure on like certain events. And yeah, I think it's a lot more adventurous for sure.
Yeah, well, I was just sort of like, me wearing a skin tight dress all the time with like these, 4-inch stiletto heels. That's just not me. I don't mind doing that maybe once or twice a year, but
Yeah.
Sorry, you guys. I didn't want to burp. But that's a big part of who I am is sort of kind of like that chill, kind of like casual, not casual, but just like not, how can I put it? Not so put together in a stereotypical fembot way.
Yes.
But I think, I think I want to explore more in terms of degendering fashion. and seeing how other ways I could sort of like put it on its head a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, my identity of what is womanly or whatever, I'm really sort of like, I define it for myself rather than, is this trendy or is this, if my boobs aren't out, then I'm not being girly or whatever. Like I'm really sort of laying off myself in terms of that. I don't know. What about you?
I'm definitely with fashion leaning towards more what makes me feel better about myself than what is somewhat more like the most popular thing in the like not media, but in the fashion world.
Yeah.
So if it's, I mean, during the quarantine, my fashion is just whatever is comfortable and the quickest to put on in the morning.
Yeah.
But before that, for sure, it was like a nice suit would always make me feel good. And if I feel good, then going out the door, then it's going to make me have a better day.
And do you feel like your identity is less tied to like, oh, masculine dude than maybe...
I've never been like that.
You're like, who was that?
Nope, don't know who that person is.
No, but you know the way like maybe when you were a teen, you know, and you were out in these skate parks. Is that what you were doing?
Sure.
Well, you were loitering outside of businesses.
Yes, I was definitely loitering.
But you were with your bros, and I'm sure amongst your homies, you would have...
Do you know me? Among my homeboys.
But I'm sure there was some sort of unsaid code about this is what is manly for us, and we all sort of have to adhere to that.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. I had this conversation actually recently with one of my old friends where, looking back, we were both like, the people we were back then, we would never even associate with these days. So I think that is all part of growing up and then realizing not necessarily the things we said, but how we acted back then I'd never dream of doing these days.
What's like a thing that you did back in the day that you're like, ugh, who was I? Who was that?
I don't know, like maybe it's always like having parties down the beach and then just trying to show off like all the time, just trying to, I don't know the words to put it into, but not to be the center of attention, but to show how cool we are. And like, yeah, you wouldn't have liked me back then, I don't think. Yeah,
that sounds, I'm like, my vagina just dried up. Yep. Well, I'm so glad that we both are sort of evolving in terms of our identity and like really how we want to take the pressure that society puts on us off and just really sort of enjoy who we are instead of, you know, like looking down the list of all the things, or am I like checking them all off? So I'm really proud of us. And I hope the journey continues.
Absolutely.
Your hair, by the way, is like so cute.
Haven't even cut it since the beginning of quarantine. Okay,
let's get to this episode because Alok is amazing. What I want to do with this, I guess I should back up. Okay. So to everyone listening to this or watching this, I wanted this conversation with Alok to not be, you know, non-binary representation identity 101, not degender fashion 101. So if you feel like you're listening to anything, you're kind of like, oh, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. Feel free to pause, look it up, and then jump back in the conversation because I really wanted to not put the burden on Alok to have to constantly sort of be an educator in these spaces and sort of talk about these experience in a real nuanced and interesting way. So I hope that like everyone enjoys the conversation, but just sort of like the more basic stuff I didn't want to sort of burden day with. So I hope that's chill because what we do talk about is so great.
So great.
I mean, I am fully obsessed. So I hope you really enjoy this discussion about identity and degender fashion. And maybe it might open you up to sort of kind of, you know, investigate a little bit in your life. So without further ado, here's Alok. Ah! Hi, Alok. Alok. How's
Hi.
it going?
You know, teetering into oblivion in quarantine, but trying to
Yeah.
stay afloat.
No, I'm so glad you could do Black Frasier. I'm really excited about this podcast. You're one of the people that I wanted in the first batch of episodes because I just think what you're doing is so incredible and amazing. And I just think people are going to fall in love with you. So thank you so much for joining. We are talking today about identity and degender fashion, which I think is amazing because I think we are in a time where even though it seems like there's a lot of progress that's happening that people can get excited about, the reality is there's so much more work that needs to be done. And so I kind of want to maybe let's start at what your Batman Begins like origin story is. And then I want to talk about how you're, one of the faces of degender fashion and what that movement is all about and how people can really I think a lot of people can't really understand what they internalize it as like an attack on their identity as opposed to it really being about everyone being freed up to explore who they are.
Right.
So yeah, if you could just sort of give us a little insight into how you became the wonderful person that you are today.
How many hours do you have? I'll try to be brief. So it began in first grade when we were asked to dress up for school photo day. And then Cody in my classroom said, Alok doesn't need to dress up because he at the time. He's always dressed up. And I remember that was meant to be levied as an insult, but I experienced it as like, yes, I am. And for me, fashion was always a kind of mode of resistance because I couldn't control the stereotypes that were assigned to me on the basis of my race or my gender, but I could kind of dislodge people's assumptions by dressing up. And clothes were always a way of communicating the things that I couldn't articulate with language. At that point in my life, it was too unsafe for me to really explain my gender to people. So I was just insinuating it with my fashion. And I was always trying to say, I'm a person and not just like a straw man for all of your projections and anxieties. Fast forward a couple decades, and here I am. And what I'm sort of calling for people who might not be familiar with degender fashion is the complete degendering of fashion and beauty industries. And what that means is stopping to gender products as men's products or women's products, as Queen Rihanna recently tweeted, like skincare has no gender. And it's not just skincare, it's makeup, it's dresses, it's everything. That actually we should be able to determine what we wear and what we look like versus companies dictating this is what a man or woman looks like. And as you were alluding to, this actually for me is like an act of public service for cis men. I'm trying to rescue men's fashion. Like, it's literally so tragic that men have been wearing the same silhouette for hundreds of years. I'm like, girl, like that's gotta go. And so actually this is an act of love to say when it's 110 degrees outside, you can wear a mini skirt and don't have to call it a kilt. All right. But people seem to think that this is like selfish and like us erasing them. It's actually about us giving more options for everyone, which is these are arbitrary articles of clothing. Why are we having them to do anything with gender? Like, why can't it just be about self-expression and beauty? And why can't beauty and self-expression just be for all people? Why can't we just wear what we want to wear? And I thought it would be like a really kind of like easy thing, I gave this big talk last year and I was like, okay, this is going to be it. But the amount of resistance that I get in interfacing with a lot of these companies, people just have such entrenched stereotypes where they're like, being in a dress is feminine. Why? Like, what is it about a garment that makes it a gender?
Yeah. So how did you get to this space of, I don't even want to call it enlightenment because I really just think, doing research on you and following you, I'm just sort of like, yeah, of course, this totally makes sense. And you're right. There is so much resistance and people get so tied to their identity being protected, but they don't want to protect the identity of trans people, of non-binary people. And to me, it's like, it just doesn't make any sense that on one hand, you really want to protect those identities, but on the other hand, you don't want to protect another set of identities. And so I'm curious as to sort of what along the way made you go, this is not just going to be something that I'm going to do for my personal life, but this is something I want to do in the public space as a leader in this movement. Because I think that you know, not everyone is built for that. Not everyone has the tools in order to do that in a thoughtful way. And so I'm curious as to what made you be like, I'm going to just stand up and be this voice that maybe I feel is lacking in these circles.
Well, you know, spirituality is about to enter the chat.
Oh, great. Love it.
It for me is really, it's a spiritual project, because I really believe that most people have been indoctrinated into only knowing themselves based off of other people's ideas of who they should be. And if we ask people, who are you? They don't know, because most people only know who they are based off of what they've been told. And I think the threat that especially non-binary and gender non-conforming people like me pose to the world is that we show people this is what it looks like to actually do this work for yourself and to not live your life on other people's terms. And we are a walking question mark to them. Do you know who you are? Because I do. And I think it is a very dangerous thing to know oneself in this world, because this world requires doubt. That's the most profitable emotion there ever was, self-doubt. But I actually came to conviction. And because I came to conviction, I was like, it's not enough for me to just know this for myself. I need to create the conditions so that other people can be able to be self-expressive and free. Because I just don't think it's freedom when we don't get to select the choices to begin with. People ask me, are you a man or a woman? And I just say no, because why are those the only two options there are? Why can't it be, hey, who are you? Like, why can't we leave that open-minded, you know? And I just feel like this is for me the difference between being in a creative culture and a template culture. A template culture basically gives us a parameter of like, okay, you're only allowed to use these options under these constraints, these criteria, but we never actually question who determines these constraints, who determines these criteria, and why can't we actually live our life on our own terms?
Yeah. So can you sort of talk about the work that you had to do on yourself? Because I do the whole concept of like a template society. I've never ever thought of it like that. And so to me, I'm wondering if a lot of the resistance is in some part informed by the fact that people are too afraid to do the work to really get to know who they are. And that it's easier to just say, well, like, these are the options I'm giving. I'll just like check the box on this. And so I can keep it moving.
Yeah. You know, we fear the things that we're currently suffering. That's the silly part. People are afraid of loss, but they've already experienced so much loss. People are afraid of failure, but they're already failing. It's because we don't understand that the majority, I mean, I think you get this as a performer, as a comedian, that actually it's the things in the world that are most invisible that often have the biggest impression. Like a joke makes people's life change. And one narration, you could say it's kind of superficial, like, what's the purpose of humor? And the other, I say, humor is essential for a good life. Like, if I didn't have humor, why would I exist, you know? And I think that that's kind of what fueled me in my life as I began to realize, you know, I'm unhappy and I want to actually have happiness and I want to have joy. And happiness for me doesn't look like conditional acceptance. It doesn't look like disappearing myself to be more palatable, to be liked. Happiness actually looks like accepting my rough edges. Happiness looks like I'm inconsistent and I'm imperfect, but I'm still fucking lovable. And I think it took a lot of suffering on my part. It took a lot of pain. It took a lot of harassment. It took a lot of betrayal. But then I looked at, when all the noise was gone, I looked at myself and I was like, I like what's here, you know? And I think that narrative gets lost. I think when it comes to especially the media right now, talking about trans people and especially Black and brown trans people, is it dwells on our violence and our loss and like our tragedy, but not on our self-knowledge. Like, no one actually says, wait, so you are willing to give up your personal safety, connections to your family, professional viability, specifically to pursue your authenticity? That's awesome. That means that you can teach the world what authenticity and truth are. No one tells that story. And so I think for me, it's about loss, but it's also about incredible joy. I reached a point in my life where I was tired of living other people's fantasies of who I should be. And I was tired of being taught, because I think so much of this is about beauty. I think we grow up, especially as oppressed people in this world, being taught that to be beautiful is to not be us. To be beautiful is to be white, is to be thin, is to be gender conforming, is to be cis, is to be straight. And I just started to ask myself, why should I have to disappear myself? Why should I have to invisibilize myself in order to be regarded for my beauty? Why should I have to get rid of my facial hair? Why should I have to look like other people? And I developed a new definition of beauty for myself. Beauty is about looking like yourself. And that's, I think, my rallying cry with everything that I do, is I'm not trying to prescribe to people another box, another prism. My goal is not making everyone identify as non-binary or everyone be trans. Like, that's what people mistake what I'm doing. What I'm actually trying to say is each person gets to self-author their own life. And the way that I think I learned that, and maybe you can speak to this too, is like, there's nothing more sacred to me than a stage and a spotlight. And I wish everyone in the world had access to that, because when you have an audience and you're on stage, you just have to figure it out. Like, it's like this vulnerable moment and you're just kind of working it out. And then people are actually affirming you for you. And you make it as a stage performer when you're your most you, not when you're trying to be funny, but when you're just you. And that lesson of being a stage performer, I brought in to bring that energy of performance everywhere I go, which is, here is a microphone, here's a light, show me you on your terms.
Yeah, and it's also when you're on stage and you have that microphone where you're like, oh, I have to say something, and B, I have to figure out what that is. So it really makes you sort of self-reflect and be like, what do I want my message to the world to be? And I love that you talked about, especially during these times, how people look at whether it's non-binary, trans, or, you know, Black and brown people, and our narrative is just sort of the trauma that we endure. So I'm wondering, when you became fully into yourself as non-binary, what was like your first memory of joy when you were like, now I really feel like I am finally myself?
Mm-hmm. You know, I'm usually bad at the whole memory thing, because I'm
Yeah.
like, I can't even remember like what I did yesterday. Like, that's why I think I take so many photos of myself, just to remember that I exist. It's like, okay, this selfie from 5 years ago proves that I was in fact alive. Congratulations. But this question I can't answer, because I recently wrote about it in my new book, Beyond the Gender Binary. So the first time that I wore a dress in public was so intense for me. Like, I think I was a senior in college, and I had like dressed like in kind of women's clothes, but like in a very kind of like suggestive. And when I'm saying women's clothes, there's a huge quote around that, because I think that anyone should be able to wear what are colloquially understood as women's clothes. But I used to wear them in a sort of like more androgynous kind of queer way. So it'd be like, okay, I'm going to wear a blouse, but with some jeans. But this was like unambiguously, I am out here in a dress. It was like a frock, if you will, like frilly, very much like Little Homo on the Range, kind of like extreme Laura Ingalls Wilder, like kind of like country dress moment. And I went outside, and I just literally, I felt so free. Like, I felt so, I guess the way that I describe it is I felt aligned. I felt like everything that I had been before, there'd been a kind of schism between who I knew myself to be and what I was presenting. And in that moment, I felt like aligned. Like, it was a spiritual practice of presence. Like, I felt present. Like, I felt like more intelligent and more funny and more emotionally available. Because I think I was low grade disassociated until that point. And the funny thing with me is, like, I didn't know that I was missing it. And I think that's a point that often gets lost, is so often the narratives that we hear is that people experience the sense of absence and know what the solution. I didn't know that I was absent. I thought I was fine, but it's because I didn't know what joy was. And until I experienced joy, I didn't realize that I was missing it. And I think that's what propels me now, is not just that I'm trying to like eliminate violence. That's the base level for me. Yeah. Like, I just feel like we're in this really moment right now where it's basically like, hey, everyone, don't attack people. And people are like, that's revolutionary. That is so basic to me. I'm like, beyond like defense, I want us to actually fight for pleasure and joy. And so for me, so much of what animates my commitment to fashion and beauty, which a lot of people see as like superficial or irrelevant is because these are places where I find, and so many people find, joy. Being able to look in the mirror and actually say, I am everything. That is so powerful. And that's what we need. We don't need just like legislation. Obviously, that's important, but we need spiritual transcendence. And that comes from an appreciation of our worth. And worth is so linked to our self-knowledge of our beauty.
Yeah, and it's also whenever people make the sort of argument that fashion and beauty is sort of superficial, it's like, well, actually it shapes entire cultures. You know what I mean? Like if you look at someone like a Rihanna, her having, 40 shades and foundations really is what forced all these other companies who like only cared about very fair-skinned people to actually then include everyone else in their foundation. So when people say that, I go, oh, that's not true, A. And then B, it makes me also wonder, like, for me, while it's great to have like the Rihannas and to have like, cis people really sort of being like the people who are helping to open the doors, I think also at the end of the day, like what needs to really happen is to have trans people, to have non-binary people in these sort of corporations who can really push these things along. So it's not just seen as like a fun pride campaign that we're doing or like a limited capsule collection, but it is within the ethos of the company. And my question to you is, do you think that human beings are even capable at this point of being that sort of forward and really making that change in the industry?
Well, first, I just want to say thank you for like having this level of fluency around these topics. It's so refreshing and delightful because I have so many interviews that are just boring to me because people are starting at square one. And it's like, wow. And you're literally like, okay, so we've established that. And I really appreciate that. I'm sure you get this sensation as well, too. I'm just kind of bored about a lot of the mainstream conversations around this stuff because they make such a fuss around things that are so clear to me. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when people will recognize that fashion is actually about beauty and not about gender. And it's just irritating to me that it's going to take so long because one of the worst things you can tell someone is you're a visionary beyond your times or you're ahead of your times. And people tell me that all the time. And I'm like, actually, let's rephrase. What you're meaning to say is, I am going to create a world that makes you suffer because I'm too lazy and unwilling to help. That it recuses you of your own agency when you make this about my exceptional knowledge or beauty or artistry. This shouldn't just be about me. This is actually about everyone. And all of us need to be doing our part to challenge this. But I think what you're alluding to, what so often happens is that I have been saying this message for over a decade, but the minute Harry Styles wears a quote women's blouse in a magazine, he gets a million's press and it's like, it's congratulations to him. And this is not a critique of Harry, but it's a comment on political economy, meaning palatable bodies get seen as revolutionary, whereas people who are visibly gender nonconforming every day like me get seen as a threat. That people seem to be okay with gender ambiguity on a runway, but not gender ambiguity on a subway. And until we actually can create a world where it's not just a pride capsule collection, but it's actually every single day from small town Texas to New York City, we're comfortable with people with beards and lipstick outside, then I'm not going to keep quiet. And so I do think we're going to get to that point, but we're not getting there fast enough. And the reason we're not getting there fast enough is that we prioritize the comfort of dominant groups over dignity. And I'm not even going to say justice. I'm going to say dignity, because there is no dignity in a world that practices this kind of gender segregation. That's not dignified to me. And so the kind of ask that I'm making of the world is not about political correctness, not about inclusion. It's actually about beauty and dignity. And I keep on returning to those words because for me, I really am frustrated about how gender has become provincialized as like, this is just about women and trans people, as if only women and trans people have genders. Everyone has a gender, and all of us are performing gendered fashion. Even men who are just wearing like a white t-shirt and jeans who are like, I don't care about fashion. That's a fashion. That you actually are perpetuating this idea that that's non-fashion. So I think my vision going forward is that we recognize the trans and gender nonconforming community as offering a gift to everyone of creativity, self-expression, and beauty.
Yeah, and also I think not sort of appropriating what you are bringing to the table and then put it on like a Kate Moss. Because I think that
Right.
happens a lot of times too, where it's like, oh, this is so cool, but we're not going to like, you know, we'll say that you're really cool and you're fashionable, but we're not going to put dollars behind you. And so I think one of the things that
I'm like, Phoebe, are you trying to be my agent right now? Because you're speaking to my heart right now. Like, if you could just be on the phone call with some of these people and be like, I see what you're doing. Because that's exactly the case. The amount of companies that tell me you're on our mood board, they'll all tell me this. They'll be like, you're such an inspiration. We all follow you on Instagram. Like, you're so creative. And I'm like, that's beautiful, but do you think that being inspirational to you is my life goals? Like, do you think I woke up today and was like, I want to inspire mediocrity? No, like I don't. And I actually deserve to be centered. And it took me a long time to say that. It took me a long time to say that because I think you internalize, and this is to anyone who's listening, we internalize our own self-image based off of what other people have told us about us, like we were sort of beginning talking about. And so I thought the only way I could make a contribution to culture was through my ideas because I was too ugly to be beautiful. I genuinely thought that. And then I had a wake-up call a couple of years ago where I was like, it's not enough. It's not enough that when I was younger and I was getting bullied, I was like, I'm going to be smart, so at least I'm redeemable. If that's not enough, it's either you want all of me or none of me. And I'm not going to wage my self-worth on the basis of being like, okay, here are my ideas, but just disappear me. I've literally been in photo shoots where they remove me because my body is too much. I've had conversations with agents and managers who say, do you think you could just remove your body hair because it's a lot for people to have to watch? Like, it's distracting. Wow. Every single time I do mainstream media, everyone is commenting on my body and not actually talking about my ideas. And I got to a point where I was like, I could accept this and I could just comply and change and be easy, but that's not what I'm about. Like, as an artist, it's not what I'm about. As an artist, what I'm interested in is what is the most you. And if you don't want to accept hairy, visibly gender non-conforming people as part of your conception of beauty, then you're not committed to this work.
And so now that you're in these sort of business spaces and you're sitting down with companies, you're maybe negotiating contracts or whatever, what are sort of things that you're saying now to these people when you negotiate that you weren't saying maybe, I don't know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 3 years ago even?
Yeah, I'm willing to leave. And I think that's something I didn't have. I think we confer our power to other people when power can only be conferred by yourself. And that was one of the biggest shifts I made in my mental health and my professional life, which I was like, I am not going to barter my dignity for anyone anymore. And if you do not see me for me, bye. Because the truth is they are profiting from us. And that is the thing that I had to really learn because everyone in this industry made me feel like they were doing me a favor. Like I was some sort of diversity checklist for them to be like, wow, like Indian, trans, gender non-conforming, queer, just check. And I'm like, actually, I'm doing you a favor because I'm elevating your basic conversations and actually making an enlightened, spiritual, dynamic experience for all of your people. I bring so much to this table. And so because I know my worth, I can't, you don't see my worth, so I'm not interested. And I used to try to beg for people to see my self-worth, but like, look at what I've done. And now I'm like, no. And I think that that's a really hard lesson because it really makes you realize that a lot of people have had to compromise the parts of themselves that made them so beautiful and dynamic in order to get where they are. And I don't want to do that. Like, I want to be able to be my most me and everything that I'm doing. And I know that things would be easier, but that doesn't mean that just because something's easy doesn't mean that it's right. And I guess that's one of the biggest lessons and energies that I'm taking in. And I think it's been hard because when you are an assertive woman or trans person, people call you a bitch and people call you ungrateful and people will try to demonize you and call you selfish. So I've had to really learn how to see past that and filter past that and actually say, all these are misdirected compliments. Like, if you think that I'm aggressive, if you think that I'm domineering, thank you so much, because that means I actually have a self. And that actually means that I know who I am.
Ugh. You're just so good. It's just because, we're talking about a lot about self-worth, and it's like so many people just walk in their day-to-day lives just really undervaluing themselves, not only in the workplace, but maybe in the dating world where they're like, this is all that I'm worthy of. And so I will put up with sort of like trash relationships, or like my relationships have to be so melodramatic, and that means it's love. If I'm like crying every other day, that means it's full of passion. And so to sort of like get to a place, how old are you?
I'm 29.
I mean, holy shit, to be 29, honestly, like to be 29 and be in a place where you really value yourself and you know what you're worth and what you give to the world and what the world also should give back to you, I think is really powerful. And so I'm wondering, like, what are maybe like a couple of steps that help you get to this place of being able to say, this is who I am worthy, and I don't have to put up with bullshit anymore. Because I think a lot of people, even in their 40s and 50s, struggle with, well, if I don't do this, maybe I'm not worthy. So they're too afraid.
Right. Well, I mean, full disclosure, you're catching me on a good day. Like if we had this conversation, like tomorrow or like 2 weeks from now, I could have been like, I don't know who I am. Like, I don't know what's going on. Phoebe, like, please. Like, so I just want to like full disclosure to everyone listening. I'm a work in progress. And I think actually everyone is a work in progress. And I think that one of the beautiful things about being non-binary for me is I'm not just rejecting the myth of male, female. I'm rejecting the myth of strong, weak. I'm rejecting the myth of here, there. That actually everything is both and at the same time. So it's like, yes, I'm self-confident, but I also have so much paralysis around self-doubt. But what I can say that is changing for me, and has changed for me, especially I'm in my Saturn return. So especially as I turned 29 this month, I was like, okay, I need to change my life. I really started to ask myself, would I ever treat anyone else like I'm treating myself? Never. I am so mean and so cruel and so unforgiving to myself. I drag myself more than anyone could ever drag me. I literally, before I go to sleep every night, I convince myself every day I am worthless, that I've done nothing, that I am just a bundle of unused potential. Like, I'm cruel to myself. And then my friends really had an intervention with me, and they said, like, if you believe in us and if you say that you love us, you need to trust our judgment, and we are judging you as a good person. So do you not see how it's disingenuous for you to say that you love me and then not love yourself because I love you? And I was able to see how other people loved me, and that gave me permission and license to begin that work of self-love. And that's why I believe coming into ourself requires other people. Like, I am a testament to the care and affection and support I've received from my friends. Thank goodness for them. I think the second thing is, I saw what happens when you settle, and the thing is, I've been using this religious metaphor. I don't know where it comes from. I'm not really like a religious person, but I just really feel in saying it. But like, Jesus comes to you multiple times, and so you have to actually embrace Jesus. And maybe that's just me giving a testament to growing up in small town Texas, where I was evangelized from like the age of like prenatally. But that's how I'm feeling it, is like, I've learned this lesson over and over and over again, but I wasn't ready to surrender to the lesson. And so what that looked like for me is, like, at so many iterations in my life, I was at rock bottom where I was like, this is what happens when you settle. I'm never settling again. And then I settled again. And I think you just get to a point where you have settled so many times and seen what happens, where I'm now at a point where I'm just kind of like, I would rather be alone than be the kind of loneliness that's required to be palatable. And that's the loneliness of palatability is something I wish we could speak a lot more about, because I think behind every successful person is a story of that suffering of being like, people only see me for this, not for my complexity. I don't want to be flattened. I think flattening one another, and I think we especially flatten artists who are people of color or Black or trans or queer. We make them the summation of their identities. Like, you, Phoebe, are just Black woman. When actually who you are exceeds, it's of course informed by those things, but it exceeds all of those stereotypes. And I experienced this in my life too, where it's like, people just wanted me to speak about my suffering, how painful it was growing up in the South. But I think my turn towards fashion and beauty was because I wanted to celebrate. I wanted to celebrate I wanted to create monuments. I wanted to design testimonies to the joy of living life on one's own terms. And I think that there's a PR campaign in this world that shows you if you live a gender nonconforming life, then you will suffer. And they don't tell the stories of joy and triumph. They don't tell the stories of community. They don't tell the stories of belonging. I genuinely now know that I am my wildest dreams as a kid. And so everything else just feels like supplementary to that, because every day I'm able to be like, oh my gosh, like I'm my own biggest fangirl because I did this. There are so many things that we're trying to, and I want to be very clear to people. It's ongoing. Like when you are a gender nonconforming person, everyone makes it their business to be in your business. So even within the own trans community, people will still say, you're not really trans. You need to take hormones if you really want to be trans. You're not real. Everyone is projecting their garbage on you all the time. So there are days, like I said, where it's like, it's too much. But then I just pick up a phone call or I have a FaceTime and I have someone who knows me from me, not knows me for my gender, knows me for my Instagram, but knows her for me. And they look at me and say, look, I believe in you. And that's what I need.
So in terms of like people always being in each other's business and trying to say like, this really makes you trans or this really makes you non-gender binary, like I'm not privy to those conversations. So what sort of, it seems counterproductive to still be trying to specifically nail down someone to like one soundbite, and that's still going on. So it's like, how can people who are listening to this, who are maybe they are thinking like, you know, maybe I am non-binary, maybe I'm not gender conforming, but I'm too afraid to sort of like explore that within myself because I don't want to deal with all the infighting. Like, how can someone like really still have the courage to be their most self in the face of potential sort of conversations and discussions that are maybe designed to undermine who they really want to be?
Right. You know, it is counterproductive, but trauma is counterproductive. And that's why I begin all these conversations with trauma, is because trauma makes us treat each other like shit. And trauma makes us mistake hurting other people as healing ourselves. And they're two separate things. And so for me, it had to be my own healing journey. And when I worked on my healing journey, I actually have so much love for everyone. I genuinely understand that people are acting from a place of scarcity and fear and loss. And I want to give everyone a big hug and a platform heal and just be like, let's go, you know, like let's heal together, because healing has to be part of this conversation. And I think people mistake coming out as healing, and they're not the same. Because I thought growing up, okay, the minute I can declare my truth, then I'm going to be set. And then I wasn't, because I had to process all the pain from the 18 years prior. And so then I processed that pain. And so then I had my next coming out. Because coming out as a process for me. It was never just like one moment. It was like clarity continues to evade me. Like every day I'm like, oh, a new dimension of myself. But what I can say is there are people like me, maybe they're few and far between, but there are people like me who see you beyond visibility, which is my working definition for love. And what I mean when I see you beyond visibility is I experience your energy. Because gender is not about anatomy, it's about energy. And the reason that we've forgotten that is because Western colonization made the body symbolic of truth. And all the spiritual traditions that I'm a part of, the body is a vessel of truth, but not a symbol of it. It's not interchangeable with truth. That I actually occupy so much more space than my physical body. Hello. And that I am my ancestry. And that I am connected to this entire spirit world that we just pretend like doesn't exist. I believe in miracles and I believe in magic. And so because I believe in miracles and magic, I believe in love. And when I say I believe in love, what I mean is I forgive you and I hold you through this because I know how difficult the world is. And know that there are those of us who have done this kind of healing work and are doing this healing work who are ready to embrace you. And there are other people who haven't, who are going to deputize everything. They're going to use science. They're going to use feminism. They're going to use medical language. They're going to use their personal experiences. But all of that is literally camouflaging their trauma. trauma, it's kind of, I use this metaphor a lot. It's like in Stranger Things, that kind of beast that like just gets inside the body. That's trauma. Yeah. And so you don't even know that it's in there, but it's like in there and it's infected you. And so trauma will just recruit every single discourse as a way to legitimize itself. But when you put on the light on trauma, I'm using so many spiritual metaphors today. I don't know what is happening.
This is so good.
But when you put on the light to trauma, then actually trauma, it can't work. And I just wish that we could be honest. And I think the reason we're not honest about this, and I'm very clear, I'm funny, but it comes because I'm depressed. Like I had to know pain to know pleasure. I had to know trauma to know humor. But I think the reason we don't speak about trauma is because we always need to pretend that we're self-actualized. Like we navigate being like, hey everyone, like I love my life. Like I'm amazing. That I know who I am. And actually everyone is like teetering into oblivion like I began. And everyone is full of self-doubt and everyone is so confused. And the minute that we can just stop playing pretend, the irony of being a performer is people think that we're performing, but really we're pointing at them. We're saying, babes, you're performing. And the minute that you accept that you've internalized these narratives that are not actually true, then we can actually have this healing work. So I guess to anyone who's listening, who's questioning their gender, welcome to a journey that will last for the rest of your life, where there's not going to be that much clarity. But what I can tell you is that there'll be conviction, and that matters more.
Yeah, and I want to stick on healing for a second, because I think there are a lot of misnomers about that process. Like you were saying, a lot of times people will think like, oh, I do this one thing and I'm automatically healed, and not really understanding that it is a lifelong process. And that can be daunting, that can be intimidating, and that can make certain people be like, well, screw this, I don't want to heal. If it is going to require this much work day in, day out, then what is the point? And so I'm wondering, like, in terms of you speaking about your own healing, like what do you wish that people knew about the process of healing that would make them want to double down on it and stick with it for the rest of their lives?
I think it relates to what we've been talking about ambitioning beyond just ending violence towards like having an active presence of pleasure. It's not just about eliminating the suffering. It's about being able to experience the joy fully. When I was low-grade disassociated, trying to live everyone else's fantasy of who I should be, I would watch a movie and be moved for like 5 seconds and then be unable to really be moved by it. The kind of technical term for it is an anesthetic feeling, which is a feeling that circumvents you feeling the full extent of your feeling. So for example, having rage when actually you mean to feel sorrow. But people can't access the full duration of their sorrow or their grief because they're afraid. And so now that I'm doing my healing work, and it's not that I've done, I'm doing, I'm able to watch a movie and I'm just crying for the next 3 hours. I'm like, I'm so moved. Like I experienced life full throttle. I have a conversation with someone and I'm like, I love this person so much. Like in this podcast right now, I'm like, I'm having such a great and meaningful time.
Oh, good.
I have so much more meaning, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what I can't articulate that to my past self because I didn't know it was even possible. Like I said, I didn't know meaning was possible. I just thought monotony was possible. And healing has allowed me to find meaning. And that's a double-edged sword because then you experience the pain more. Yes, but you also experience the pleasure more. And I think I'd rather have meaning in my life than rote monotony. And I think that many people in this life are coasting. And that's not the fault of their own. It's because every institution in this country was erected specifically to make us coast. But I see something else percolating in the world right now. And I've been really excited by it.
What do you think is going to happen?
You know, I think people are fed up. I think people are really fed up with the disconnects between what they've been told, but what is manifest, the disconnect between what they know and what they see, the disconnect between this administration and the diversity of this nation. And I think people are recognizing these disconnects are calculations. And because they're calculations, that means they can be recalculated. Because they're designs, that means they can be redesigned. And I think we're beginning to realize that objectivity and truth are actually just monuments to white male supremacy. That actually we can make our own monuments. We can make our own altars. We can make our own heroes. We can make our own leaders. We can make our own art. And what it looks like then is the most powerful resistance in the world is the creation of an alternative. And what I see happening now is the creation of an alternative. I've seen some of the best art I've ever seen in my life emerge in the past few months during quarantine. Did you see that new Chloe and Haley video that they did on Zoom?
Yeah.
I was just sitting there like, this is a creative renaissance. Chloe and Haley, this is a creative renaissance because people are taking constraints and they're using them as invitations. Look at you making a podcast during quarantine when we can't even be in a recording studio.
Yeah.
That kind of dynamic for me is what changes the world. When you take constraints not as a prophecy, but as a provocation to actually be like, oh, you don't think that I can do this? I'm still going to do it.
Okay, that was so good. And I want to go to my favorite part of the podcast, which is audience questions on Black Frasier. But I just want to say thank you so much. This is like, people need to hear this because I think, even when I just talk with my friends and just about life, I think we're all sort of feeling this sort of like this air of disappointment of like, is this like, this is what all of this is? Like, this is what we grew up believing. Now it's all falling apart because it was all bullshit in the first place. And I think like it's easy to stay in that sort of disappointment. That's sort of like, what the hell? And it's harder to like sort of rise above that. And like you're saying, see the opportunity of like, it's not a constraint. It's not the end, but it's the rebirth of something more genuine and authentic. So, I mean, just having this conversation with you, I'm just like, I'm already a fan, but this has been so fantastic. I just want to say. Okay, so we have a handful of questions. Okay, yes. This is a good one. Okay. This is from Michaela in Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you for everything you're doing. You're so inspiring. I love the idea of degender fashion, and I want to believe we'll get there someday. But then I look at all the fashion designers and houses, and for the most part, they are pushing binary looks. So what do you think it would take for a major label or brand to truly be genderless because so much of their money is tied up in financial support? Or do you think a fashion house would only be genderless if it was starting from the ground up?
Oh, gosh, what a great question. I think first of all, we need investors. We need people who are actually funding the next generation of designers who are out here doing amazing work like Telfar, like Harris Reed. There's so many amazing gender neutral random identities, Chromat, who are doing body positive, diverse, gender inclusive fashion design. And there's just no resources because the vanguards kind of control the fashion industry. So we really need investors. And then I think second, it needs to also, what I hear from a lot of companies is they'll be like, we agree with you intellectually, but there's just no demand for this. Like if we were to market skirts for all people just wouldn't buy it because of the social stigma. And that's where it also involves all of us doing our own part to challenge gender norms ourselves. We can't just wait. I think a lot of us wait for approval from the top dogs rather than actually introducing. They need to seek our approval. And so what I always ask people is, how are you in your own life complicating gendered assumptions? How are you interrupting the conflation of gender and fashion? How are in the conversations that you're having, how are you treating people? Interrogate the people that you interface with on a day-to-day. I know this changes when we're locked up in our houses. So
yeah,
maybe 3 years from now, maybe 30 years from now, when you're listening to this podcast, are you seeing people who are confounding your ideas of gender? Why not? What systems of design have been meant to invisibilize those people from your view? Why do you associate that with urbanity in New York City and not Champaign Urbana? I don't even know why it's a Champaign Urbana. I think that there's a place, Urbana Champaign. Okay. She's making up words on this podcast. It's part of the larger spiritual trend that we're happening right now. And then I really want to also bring in hope, because I think like when you're talking earlier before about how so many of your friends are feeling like disappointed, like there's this kind of like stagnancy. I also think that it's in vogue right now to be cynical. And I'm so over cynicism. Cynicism is not cute. It's not a cute aesthetic. I'm not interested in her. I returned her a while ago. Like, actually, being hopeful isn't the same thing as being naive. Being hopeful even is the same thing of being optimistic. Being hopeful is about saying, I don't know. And because I don't know, that means that there could be something good. So my sort of relationship to this question is, I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that there's a groundswell. There's traction being built. There's the fact that I could even exist speaks a lot to the contributions I've made that were people before me. And I know that we will win. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And also, major fashion brands should just like step up. Like, if just one of them did
if anyone's listening right now, just slip into my inbox. Let's
talk. Okay. Oh, this is good. Alok, I need your help. I'm non-binary and my family refuses to acknowledge this and continues to misgender me all the time. I have compassion because this is a fairly new part of my evolution, or evolution, as Phoebe might say, LOL. But there's also a part of me that's like, y'all are being rude as fuck. Of course, I never say this, too damn scared, but it does feel disrespectful that they're not trying harder to see me as the person that I am now. From Anonymous.
I would really just love for you to read all anonymous comments going forth in my life. So if I can just text you, hey, I'm getting these anonymous comments, you just make them sound so palatable and nice.
Oh, of course.
Here's the thing. Navigating family while non-binary is extremely difficult because people conflate family as like ownership. They think that they like literally own you. So like when I started to come into my gender, my family would just say the most absurd things to me. That was so humiliating and painful because I would say on the one hand, you say that you love me. On the other hand, you're literally deliberately sabotaging my life. And then I had to name boundaries. And it was really hard for me because I was so close with my family. But I essentially said, if you continue to misgender me, I'm not coming back. And I only was able to do that because I was at a place professionally and financially where I wasn't reliant on that. And I waited to be in that place. Like, I think I could have earlier had these conversations, but I was afraid of jeopardizing that connection. But it was one of the best things I did, naming a boundary with my family, because then they realized, oh, I can't continue as behavior as usual. So think about what boundaries feel comfortable for you and accept that this is traumatizing. I think that we so often won't name, hi, I'm traumatized. I think it goes to what we were saying before about people pretend that they're self-actualized and like stable when they're actually not okay. And this stuff really hurts. This really has a negative impact on your mental health. And for self-preservation, sometimes you just have to name boundaries. And boundaries don't have to be forever. Boundaries can shift and adjust over time. But ultimately, preserving your wellness is not about self-indulgence. It's about self-preservation.
Oof. Drop those boundaries. I love it. Okay, so we have two questions left. Okay. Ooh, this is fun. Hey, I have a question. This is from Jose in Brooklyn, New York. I have a question. I want to dabble in skirts, but so many are femme. Where should I start / what are the options for more mask skirts?
I'm not sure what a mask skirt is, but
maybe like a more masculine presenting, I guess.
But I guess I would ask, like, what is masculine presenting? It's up to you, baby. But there are some men's designers who make clothes like skirts for men. So one would be Random Identities, and another one would be a designer in New York named R.Swiader, R. Swader. They both design, quote, menswear that's more feminine, and another one's Paloma Spain. And just seeing like what kind of people that they're in orbit with, and they'll probably turn you to other designers. I think also Instagram makes this kind of easy for a lot of people because there's just so many incredible people to follow who can show you where they're shopping or how they're looking. And once again, on this conversation around superficial, I really believe in fashion blogging. And that's how I got my start. Like years and years ago, I was on this website, lookbook.nu. And I would cajole all my friends into taking obnoxious photos of me. And I would always people would be like, why are you so vapid? Like, why do you? And I'm like, no, I'm documenting something that doesn't exist. And I wanted to give people aesthetic permission to be brown and bearded and fabulous and wear whatever you wanted to wear. And so I think a lot of my style inspiration comes from looking at style bloggers all across the world. So just like find people who are doing really fun things with their style and see what kind of stuff they're resourcing from. But also so happy that you're ready to be part of this journey. And I'm so excited for the beauty that you're going to bring to the world.
Yeah, I have a question. Would you ever want to have like your own fashion label? Or do you think that's like not a world that you don't want to get like that in the weeds when it comes to fashion?
I 100% do. Yes. And that has always been a dream of mine and is a long-term goal. And for me, what I want to do with that is not like, I hate the kind of capsule collection conversation that you initiated before of like, we're always seen as a spinoff. So designers will be like, I'm making my first ever gender neutral swimwear line. And it's like, babes, do you think that the water identifies your gender? Like the water doesn't give a fuck about your gender. Actually, the water's just like chilling, you know? So actually swimwear was already gender neutral. So I want to begin with that presumption, not just to create clothes for trans and gender non-conforming people, but to create clothes for everyone that celebrate beauty, not gender binary. But the issue is the fashion industry, especially in this economy, is like, it's really impossible right now. Yeah. So we're talking about like long form vision. I'm just trying to make my connections, but I still have these dreams because I think, you know, I designed a lot of my own clothes and especially a lot of my own performance clothes. I've designed 3 capsule collections of my own work. And what I loved about that process is it found a way for me to physically embody the kind of spiritual, political values that I have. That's something that I had never really thought about before, like to actually have an artifact that you could be like, here's my world. And then to see other people wear your world and bring that message, because it is fashion as activism. I designed like the most strange, zany things and I would wear them because, you know, for me, the world's a stage, darling. So I'm wearing it at the bodega, I'm walking down the street and people look at me and I'm like, wow, I'm showing these people my own self-image. That's so powerful. And ever since I started designing in 2017, it's been my dream to be able to produce and mass produce lines. So hopefully in the future.
Okay, we're going to speak it into existence. It's going to happen.
And then I can outfit you. That would be so fun.
Oh my God. Because I really want to experiment more with color and just sort of like, I think I grew up, I guess you would call like back in the day, like a tomboy. And then it was sort of like, I kind of like didn't want to take fashion too seriously, but then I would be like watching Sex and the City and reading Vogue and like all those things. And then I got to a place where I was like, now I'm just like, I just want clothes to be fun and I don't want to like overthink it. Like if my belly sticks out a little bit, that's like not the end of the world. Like, you know, all these places this place I'm at now, it's like, I truly see fashion as fun. And so I think I would love to collaborate with you. That'd be so cool. Okay. So our last question is from Jasmine. She's in Austin, Texas. And she asked, how can we ensure that genderless fashion will stay of movement? I feel as though people love to get behind something for a minute or two, but most don't really stay in it for the long haul. So I don't know. It's hard for me to remain hopeful. How can I get out of this funk and how can people step up and continue to step the fuck up for the long run?
Well, howdy, my fellow Texan over there. So I take a lot of hope from history. People are like, how are you so hopeful? And I think it's because I really try to learn our history to understand that like everything we have now, people never could have imagined what it was before. So a lot of people don't know that in the US, it used to be illegal to quote cross-dress. So they were basically called the masquerade laws that made it a criminal act to wear clothes that were not consistent with your assigned sex. So actually women would be arrested for wearing pants and suits. You had to be wearing at least 3 articles of clothing associated with your assigned sex. Fast forward to 2020, we could never imagine Zendaya being arrested for wearing a suit. In fact, we're like, Zendaya, thank you for inventing the suit. We're going to erase everyone who wore a suit before you. That's the kind of energy I want to bring to the silhouette of a dress and a skirt, which is that 30 years from now, we look back and we'd be like, are you kidding me? It used to be taboo for people to wear skirts. What? And so history gives me possibility and hope because literally women weren't allowed to wear jeans, t-shirts, all these things now that we're able to do because we made them gender neutral. The silhouette of pants became gender neutral. The silhouette of a t-shirt became gender neutral. Can we do that due diligence and make makeup gender neutral? Make jewelry gender neutral? Make dresses gender neutral? I think so because there's a historical precedent. And then the second thing I will add to that is I'm a screaming queen, darling. And until the grave, I'm going to be out here making sure this is not just a trend. I'm going to be that bitch when I'm 75 in my platform sneakers, my sari and my cardigan at the track, just taking a walk. And then overhearing someone say men's clothes and being, excuse me, what is it? You know, I'm going to be that person. So as long as there are screaming queens, there's always hope. and know that like I have a reservoir of validation to keep going. Like I know that they're going to try. I mean, they've been trying to extinguish us since the beginning of time for like literally thousands of years, but like men's fashion, it's just not working.
What a great answer. This has been such a phenomenal conversation. And I truly am it's like when like talking to you, it's just like one of those where you like get that feeling where you're like, oh, I'm talking to a game changer. You know what I mean? Like it's just like there's just such an energy about you that I'm like, your impact on this world is going to be so massive and wonderful. So thank you for doing the work and encouraging other people to do the work. And I'm so grateful that I was able to have a not boring conversation with you, because that was very important for me not to be like, let's make this, you know, non-gender conforming 101. Like that's a waste of your time. And like people can do the work and look that stuff up themselves. So I really wanted to bring my A game for you because I just think you're so
And I want to say thank you for your healing. It just like, it glows through you. I wish that everyone could... I don't want to doom everyone to the world of Zoom, so I'm actually going to retract my previous statement. But you've got this ebullience around you that suggests to me like such self-assurity and so much confidence. And I can see that you've been through turmoil and invalidation and emerged on the other side. Like, fuck it, I'm just going to do me. And that's the kind of energy that I just really covet. Like, I just need it. And so I just want to say thank you for feeding and nourishing me and giving me hope and creating a precedent for so many people of humor and politics as consistent with one another.
Oh, thank you so much. And I hope we can meet in real life, maybe whenever the vaccine. In
2072. I can't wait.
Yeah.
I can't wait. At that point, I'm going to be designing like fishbowl outfits where we can socially distance with glamour.
I love it. Oh, Bake Off. Isn't Alok the best?
I could listen to that all day. They have to be one of the most fascinating people I've ever like gotten to listen to.
And yes, I agree with that. And also just sort of there's a warmth and a genuineness about that that I feel like so many people spend their whole life pretending to be like, but they're not actually that, and they is just fully fucking it.
Absolutely.
So real.
And they understand that they're not so comfortable in their body yet, but that's okay. And it's a work in progress to get to where they feel comfortable and to who they are. I think that's very important.
You guys, I wish I could hug they. But we were remote. I mean, can this quarantine be done?
Right?
But no, it can't because we don't have a vaccine.
No. Not yet.
Okay, you guys. Check out Thay's book, Beyond the Gender Binary. There's also audiobook version too.
Ooh.
I recommend that because Thay's voice is very sort of buttery and smooth.
So captivating.
So I would say get the audiobook. But also, if you just want to read, I'm not judging, I'm not pressuring you. Do what you want. And Bake Off, as you know, this is an indie podcast. We do not have funding from the Obamas. We do not have funding from the Blue Ivy Carters. Blue Ivy runs the show. It's not Beyonce or Jay. It's Blue Ivy.
Yeah.
We do not have funding from
a mattress company. Because we all know those mattresses are everywhere.
We don't have funding from Sleepies. So because we're an indie podcast, we really wanted to just sort of like put all our love and our money and our heart into this and not take outside dollars. And instead, any sort of ad space, we want to dedicate it to just a Black-owned business that I really love or Bake Off really loves. And these companies didn't ask us to do this. This is from the bottom of our hearts and our farts. And so the company that I want to talk about today is, for the people who are listening to this, go to the YouTube because you can check out this ring that I'm wearing. It says Harriet Tubman ring. Can you see Harriet?
Ooh.
Ooh! Oh, wait.
So shiny.
Oh, wait. Can I go back? Wait.
Hold on.
Yeah. Is that good?
That's great.
Okay. But this is a really cool ring. It's by this company called, I might be butchering it, so I'm going to say it and then I'm going to spray it. Just kidding.
I actually believed you then for a moment.
I'm going to say it and then I'm going to spell it out. Sewit. Maybe it's Switsum.
Maybe.
Okay, it's spelled Sewit as in Sam. No.
T as in Sam. The phonetic alphabet has changed since I've last looked at it, that's for sure.
Ahead to the next letter.
So that's T as in Sam.
Okay. S as in Sam, E as in eagle, W as in whale, I as in interface, T as in terracotta, S as in Sam, I as in internet.
Not interface again.
U as in ukulele, M as in masala.
I would have gone for you as in you can't touch my hair.
The best-selling, New York Times best-selling book by Phoebe Robinson.
Exactly.
Yes. So I've changed up the way that we identify letters.
I saw, but if it's easier, the link's in the description.
SEWITSIUM at them on Instagram. Go to their website. They have amazing jewels. And you know what? I do think it's best that I don't let companies know that I'm doing this and it's a surprise, because I feel like it's a train wreck every time I do it.
Yes, I think it's safer if what's the famous saying? It's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Okay, forgive me, you guys. Okay, without further ado, credit time. Theme song, Gavin Turek. Host, Phoebe Robinson. Producer, Phoebe Robinson, British Bake Off. Editor, British Bake Off. And you guys, you two's looking over me because I have a book of theirs above my head called You Two and I. And it's a bunch of photographs. Should I cut that part out?